Welcome back to Monster Tamer, a 2D Pokemon-like RPG created Phaser 3. Previously, we wrapped up our section on leveling and gaining experience for our monsters. If you missed the previous videos, there'll be links in the video description to the source code up to this point, as well as the complete source code for this video. There'll also be a link to the previous videos if you'd like to catch up, so let's get started. Alright, so now we wrapped up our feature tied to gaining experience and leveling up. We're going to go ahead and start our next feature for our game. And for our next feature, we're going to be focused on extending our functionality for multiple monster support. And so we'll be adding in logic to allow us to do things like switch monsters in our party during a battle. We'll be able to switch our monsters' positions inside our party, and we'll be able to do things like release monsters into the wild if we don't want that monster anymore. And so this is going to be our first building block before we add support for catching monsters, so then that way we have ways to handle monsters in our party. Alright, so before we go any further, we're going to take a look at the features that we'll be building. And so first, we're going to go ahead and start with our battle scene. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to extend some of the functionality we've been adding through our various videos and work on actually being able to switch monsters during battle. And so part of these changes, we'll be adding a new UI component to actually see how many monsters we have available to us in this battle. And so we'll have these balls here represent our status of a monster. And so if a monster is available, it'll be visible. And if the monster is like knocked out, it'll be opaque like this. And so in addition to that, we'll be updating our switch logic. So now we're going to have this be more dynamic. So we'll actually know if we have monsters we can switch to. And if we can, we're going to go ahead and switch over to our monster party scene. We'll be able to select a monster for our battle. And so we'll be updating our logic in our monster battle scene to do things like checking if a monster is knocked out. So then that way we say, hey, they're not able to fight. We'll also add in logic. So then that way, if we try to select a monster that's already out, we'll say, hey, you can't select that monster. They're already out. And then what we can do is now choose a monster we want to bring out into battle. And so now when we bring out that monster, we'll be able to go ahead and actually update our components to display the metadata tied to that monster. And then that way our monster can actually fight and use their attacks. In addition to all those changes, we'll be enhancing our monster party scene here to have this new submenu. So then that way we can do things like select a monster for a particular action. So like switching during battle or using an item. And we did allow them to actually view the monster details at any point. So that we can actually like check our monster's attacks and things like that. So not only will we be doing updates to our battle scene, we're actually going to update our monster party scene. So like when we come to it from our world scene, we'll be able to do different actions. One example is we'll update our submenu here to now have an option for moving our monster's location around inside our party. So like if I don't want Iguanodite to be our first monster, we can go ahead and select move, and I can select Carnodusk, and that's going to go ahead and switch their location in our party. So now when we begin a battle, Carnodusk will be the first monster to appear. In addition to that, we'll add in functionality so we can actually release monsters from our party. And so then that way we can control how many monsters we actually have with us. And then that way later on, once we add our support for catching monsters, we can control how many monsters are actually in our party. Alright, so now we reviewed the feature we'll be building, we're going to go ahead and review our task list before we dive into our code. And so in order to make all this happen, the first thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and load in our new assets for our battle scene. So we need to load in those new ball icons. We need to display them to the player so we know what the overall status of our party is. And then we'll be focused on our battle scene. And so what we'll do is we'll be updating our battle monster class in our player battle monster class to add support for switching monsters. So currently a lot of our components are get created one time. And so like we have hard-coded text tied to the monster name and our HP bar and things like that. And so we'll be extending this to have new functionality to update these assets and these game objects when a monster is switched to. So that way we don't have to recreate them. We'll just go ahead and switch their texture or their text depending on what's happening. Then we'll go ahead and update our death animation. And so currently when our monster gets knocked out, we just animate them off our scene. And we're going to extend this to also work with when we switch a monster, so we can actually hide our health bar component with it as well. From there, we're going to go ahead and start working on our battle menu, and we're going to move our logic for our flee attempt out of our battle menu into a new battle state for flee. So then after that, we're going to go ahead and make some updates to our battle menu, and we're going to focus on our logic tied to where we switch our monster. Currently, we have a hard-coded message. We're going to go ahead and align this with like how we do our flee attempt, so we'll keep track that we're trying to do something, so switch a monster. And then that way back in our battle scene, we can have a brand new state for switching monsters to actually do all the logic that we need. So in our battle scene, we'll go ahead and add in that new state, and we'll add a new logic for when our scene needs to resume, because we'll be displaying the monster party scene for where we want to go ahead and select a monster. We'll then need to go ahead and update our existing states and our existing logic to know when a monster gets knocked out so we can switch to our brand new state for switching to a monster. And then we'll go ahead and work on updating our UI to actually show the number of monsters in our party. Finally, for our battle scene changes, we'll just need to go ahead and update our monster party scene so that we can support selecting a active monster while we're in the battle scene. Alright, so once we wrap up our battle scene changes, we'll switch over to a world scene. And so this is what we'll be adding in our new submenu to our monster party scene, where we can actually do our different actions like move our monsters around, release a monster into the wild, view their details, and things like that. And as part of that, we're going to create a brand new submenu so that way we can do confirmations of yes or no. That way, for things that are critical to the player, like releasing a monster, they can confirm before they actually do it. And then finally, once we have our menus, we'll actually add in our logic for moving our monsters around in our party and releasing them into the wild. All right, so now we've finished reviewing our task list and our feature we'll be building, we're actually going to dive into our code. And so our first thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and load in our new assets that'll be tied to our battle scene. And so there's going to be a direct download link in the description of this video. And I've also updated our GitHub, our assets page, to go ahead and have our new assets. So there's going to be a new zip folder called Battle UI Assets 2. And so this zip folder is just going to have 2 new images in it. That'll be the assets that we can use for using our monster balls for catching monsters, as well as displaying those icons in our battle scene. All right, so we can go ahead and download those assets now and extract them. You'll see there's already a folder path of where the assets need to go. And just to confirm, what we want to do is we want to place those under assets. We'll do images, monster tamer, and then battle. And then we'll place our 2 new images here. All right, so now we have our new assets. We need to actually load them into our game. So let's go ahead and jump over to our asset keys JSON file. And what we'll do is we're going to update our battle asset keys object here. And so we're going to add a new key. So we'll do ball thumbnail. And we're going to go ahead and set that equal to the same value. So we'll go ahead and save. So now let's go ahead and jump over to our preload scene. And we need to go ahead and load in that asset. So we'll come up to where we load in our battle asset keys. What we'll do is let's go ahead and copy that line of code. We'll go ahead and paste it. And we'll go ahead and do our new key. So we'll have our thumbnail. And for our asset path, this is going to go ahead and be our monster tamer asset path. And then this is going to be under our battle subfolder. And then we'll go ahead and have our new asset. And so we'll do Cosmo Ball PNG. All right, so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to make some adjustments to our starting monster party. So that we actually have a couple monsters while we're testing our changes. And so for our changes, what we'll do is at the bottom of our preload scene first, let's go ahead and launch our battle scene. So we'll be in the scene we want to go ahead and work in. Then what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and open up our data manager. And so inside our data manager, so we'll go ahead and come down to our init method where we go ahead and set our party. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this line of code here. I'm going to paste it twice. I'm going to go ahead and do 2 and 3. And so this should just be temporary code just so we have it. And so we'll have our starting monster. We'll have our starting monster 2, and then we'll have our starting monster 3. Then we'll want to do the same thing over in our battle scene. So let's go ahead and jump over to that class. And what we'll do is we'll come up to our init method here. And so when we start our battle scene, we just grab this logic here. And so I'm just going to copy this line of code where we get our starting monster, and we're just going to grab our next 2 monsters as well. And so we're just doing this because we don't pass this data in when we launch it directly from our preload scene. Alright, with that brings this video to an end. In our next video, we're going to work on starting to update our player and our battle monster classes to add support for being able to switch monsters. So as a reminder, there's a link in the description of the video. It's the complete source code for this video, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and hitting the bell icon to be notified when the next video in the series is released. For more great Phaser 3 content, please see the links on your screen now.